So today's cardinal lesson, we're talking about the Social Security Trust Fund and the Trust Fund report that just came out with the 2025 numbers. And you're just looking at this, oh boy, that sounds exciting. Well, there's all this stuff in the news, and my guess is most of you have heard about it, and most of you or many of you have an opinion about it. And what I'd like to do today is I've read the full report. And I've got some numbers. I just pulled out 10 numbers out of the report, and I'm going to explain to you like what's going on with Social Security. Drew?
Thanks, Hans. And we appreciate you all for tuning in. Tom, can you explain why we're doing this video today?
Yeah, I mean, we're doing this video, and we do one every year when this report comes out, because inevitably, when this happens, it's all over the news. We got all sorts of people writing articles, talking about it. And of all the topics we cover, this is the one that people come in with the most opinions when we meet them, right? They feel strongly about it. They feel like they already know what to do. And a lot of times it's based off, theories or something they've heard, and it's not based off facts. No one has really, when we quiz them, no one has really looked at the trustee report, actually looked at the numbers, looked at the accounting. And that's what we want to do today, is really walk you through what's actually in the report, what this looks like. Our goal isn't to convince you there's not a problem here, because there is, but it's not as bad as you might think it is, right? Some people come in, they think the world is ending, Social Security is not going to pay anything. I mean, it's all over the board. And so we really just want to give you the facts, walk you through the numbers, with the goal to try to get you to a point that you can make an informed decision. Because when you file for Social Security is one of the biggest decisions you're going to make in retirement. So let me bring up the show notes. You can find these at the link below our video. They're also on our website at cardinalguide.com. We have the board that we'll go through here in a second as we go through piece by piece. This one is interesting. I'd encourage you to read this. This gives you a little bit of a history lesson of what happened in the past. We'll talk more about this as we go through the show, but we faced an issue with Social Security before, and so I'll save that for later in the show here. And then the bulk of the show notes is the full trustee report. We have read through this. It's quite long. If you're interested, go for it. Read through all of it. It's 200 plus pages long here. So, set some time aside to do that. But hopefully through this video, we can give you sort of the key points, things to take away, and help you try to make some informed decisions around Social Security. So I'll turn it back to Drew here.
Thanks. And I think that's a great point. Some of you may have even heard these specific numbers, but likely they haven't been properly represented. And so, Hans, can you kick us off here with the board and explain to us the top with the accounting that we're going over?
Well, sure, Drew. I mean, if I was personally going to write an article that's in Money or Forbes or the Wall Street Journal or something about the 2025 Social Security Trust Fund report and to Congress, and I was going to talk about, and then I was in that report going to alarm the whole country that Social Security is going to become insolvent in 2034. And I was going to put that in the report. I would personally read this report before I'd print an article like that. And I just have a hunch that all this stuff you're reading in the news, all this inflammatory stuff, the people that wrote the articles, because I've read them, I've read a lot of them, never read the report. And if they did, they didn't understand it. So I'm going to just try to give you the basics of what's going on. First of all, Social Security, the whole Social Security system is a closed system. In other words, it's got money coming in and it's got money going out in Social Security benefit checks. And then it has a trust fund, or it has a large amount of money that is there in reserve to pay future claims. That's it. It's a closed system. And that's what I'm going to walk you through. Is at the beginning of 2025, there was $2.7 trillion in the Social Security Trust Fund. Now, just so you can understand how much money $2.7 trillion is, the national debt has not reached 40 trillion yet, but it's approaching it. And so we're in the 30s. And this is 2.7 trillion is actually to the good. That's money sitting in the trust fund in special treasury bonds for Social Security. And it's just there to guarantee future check payments. Okay. And that number at the end of 2025 was 2.56 trillion. So it went down by $160 billion. So in other words, during 2025, we spent 160 billion of the trust fund. Okay. And you put that there, it's a lot of money, but it's going to be a while before this thing is at zero. I mean, that's the one thing. Now, there's predictions that say it's going to hit zero in 2034, actually in the report, but they don't say it like they do in the article. There's a whole bunch of conditions on that and why for and if thens and all that kind of stuff. But there is a problem. It's going down, but there's a heck of a lot of money that's in there. So let's go through and look through some of the smaller numbers, and then we'll get on to more interesting stuff. So the income of the whole Social Security system was, during 2025, was $1.3 trillion in payroll taxes. So that was almost enough to pay all the Social Security checks. The Social Security checks that were paid to 70 million people during 2025 was 1.6 trillion. So we almost collected enough in taxes to pay all the checks. Okay. And just want to show you that number. So this is the number of all the checks. There's $1.6 trillion went out to 70 million people to pay them their Social Security checks. So that would be an expense of the Social Security system. And then I'm guessing many of you are not aware that Social Security pays its own bills, that there was $7 billion spent during 2025 to pay all the salaries of all the Social Security people, all the buildings, all the expenses effectively of running a business or running a trust fund or running a benefit payment system. Social Security pays its own bills. They're not paid out of the general revenues of the federal government. And then there was $6 billion paid out to the railroad retirees. That's over something that years ago they merged the two funds. You could really just add this to that. Point being that the Social Security system paid out 1.6 trillion during 2025, and this is the income that they had, 1.3 trillion from payroll taxes. So that's their biggest source of revenue. And for those of you that are still working, which I know includes really Tom and Drew and me, out of every paycheck, we get 6.2% deducted. You get 6.2% deducted out of every paycheck. And then at the same time, I am your employer at Cardinal. I match that. So, in other words, if you made $10,000 in a paycheck, Drew, you pay $620 into the Social Security system, and then Cardinal pays $620, so that $1,240 on your $10,000 paycheck went to the Social Security Trust Fund, or to the, as income for Social Security. And all over the U.S., all the workers paid in this 1.3 trillion. So that's a 6.2 plus 6.2, or another 12.4%. That's where they get the money, and you're paying in that money, assuming that you're going to get a Social Security check in like 30 years, and that's going to go on for the rest of your life. Okay. That's why we need to be putting more money into the trust fund. We don't need to be taking money out. So I want to go back and show you there's a problem here, and we need to do something about it. But I'm trying to give you the real facts and the real numbers and accounting, which is what the Secretary of the Treasury and the Secretary of Human Health and Human Services, you can see their signature on that report if you go into the show notes. They, by law, have to give an annual accounting to Congress, because Congress is actually the only, we're going to get into the fix later on. Congress, they're the tax writers. They can fix this. And, they're only going to do that if they get some pressure put on them. So that's really where I'm leading up to, but before we get there, I want you to understand what's going on what the sources of the problem are, and to be an educated person about this before you start speaking out about it. That's really where I'd like to get you. Now, there's a couple of other things under income that a lot of people aren't aware of. Is if you are well off and you have a higher income or a relatively high income and you're collecting Social Security, you're going to pay some income tax on your Social Security benefits. Okay, that's something they started back in 1983 to fix the Social Security Trust Fund, is they started taxing the benefits of high earners. Okay, and that's still going on today. And in 2025, that was $58 billion in federal income taxes paid on Social Security benefits. And what a lot of people aren't aware, that money doesn't go into the general federal revenue. That 58 billion goes from the IRS, I guess, or whoever collects it, back into the Social Security Trust Fund. So that's available to pay benefits. And then in addition, this $2.5 trillion that's in the trust fund earns some interest. It's very low interest because they're government bonds, but it earned $69 billion in interest in 2025, and that is a revenue source. So you put those two things together, it's like 130 or a little short of that $1 billion, or like 7-8% of the benefits paid are coming from income taxes and on Social Security benefits and interest. So these are the key numbers that I pulled out of here, out of the report, and I could save you the trouble of doing it. There's the accounting of what went on in a snapshot of 2025, and they're raising the alarm bells over some things. And so I want you to see that is that the total income was 1,449,000,000,000. The expenses were 1,609,000,000,000. So there was a deficit of 160 billion, and that 160 billion is why the trust fund went down to 2.561. It's just that simple. So this is the big indicator of the problem when it's going down, and it needs to be going up. So in other words, we need to pay all our bills with this. We need to pay for Social Security checks with this, and we need to have some left over from this to add to the trust fund so we can pay your benefits, Drew, in 30 years. I mean, is that making sense? So I want to push it to you, Drew.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And a quick question for you, just for some of our viewers who may not be aware, that 6.2 and 6.2 split, what happens if you're your own employer and you're self-employed?
I mean, the bad news here is you pay 12.4%. You pay both sides of it, okay? And this is where a lot of self-employed people get in trouble, is they're paid on a 1099. I used to have a whole team of insurance agents paid on a 1099, and some of these people were making significant money, at least significant money to them, and they weren't really appropriately preparing for it, because you got to pay the 12.4%, plus you got to pay the income taxes and the state income taxes. And if people don't prepare for that, so that's a long answer to your question, is if you're self-employed, you're paying 12.4%, up to, in 2026, the maximum is 184,500. So I want to push it to Tom. Tom, what do you have to say about all this Social Security accounting?
Yeah, one thing that I like doing, is reading the report like Hans does, but also then comparing it back to previous years and comparing them side by side to really identify further, like what's causing the issue here. And it's not surprising, but the biggest thing that's causing issues is on the benefits paying out, right? That's the number that's increasing the fastest, which again makes sense, right? We have baby boomers who are retiring. We're right in the middle of sort of that wave of them retiring, starting Social Security. That's really where the issue is it's causing benefits to increase more significantly. than the income coming into the system, the payroll taxes, because that number is actually also higher from in 2025 than it was from 2024. But it's the increase in that the revenue is not as great as the benefits going out. So ultimately, that's where the issue is. That's what all the projections, why it has projecting running out at 2034. Some sort of more pessimistic have them earlier 2032, right? I mean, there's a range, right? Because all of these are predictions of what's going to happen, and you have to make assumptions there. Ultimately, there's a problem, right? We don't want to ignore this. We're not saying, oh, we can just not think about this. But too often, I see people coming in, they're convinced Social Security is going away. They can't rely on it at all, and they need to do their planning elsewhere, or they start making bad decisions like taking Social Security as soon as they possibly can at age 62, which oftentimes is not the best decision for them when we look at the bigger picture. So ultimately, we just want you making the decision of when to file Social Security with full information, understanding what we're facing, and hopefully getting you into the best position possible.
Hans, bottom right of the board here, we have 1983 reforms. We've been in a similar position. Can you tell us how we tried to resolve this in the past?
Sure. I mean, along about 1983, we were months away from this trust fund being zero, running out of money. And what had to happen by law, because they couldn't then and they can't now, they can't pay Social Security benefits out of general federal revenues. See, a lot of people think that. They think, well, the federal government can just make up the difference. And when this trust fund runs out of money, and we can't go to it for 160 billion to make up for our fact that our expenses exceeded our income, then what we have to do immediately is cut Social Security checks by enough to make the books balance. So if we have no trust fund, we don't have the power to pay out more than we're taking in. So that's what they were facing in 1983. They were months away from having to do that. And for those of you, a lot of our viewers, you were alive then, you were just starting your career like me. And, you know, Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill made a deal. Okay, I mean, that's really what it boils down to. After the bipartisan commission came up with what they ought to do. And neither one of these, this was the Speaker of the House, this was the President of the United States. Do you think for a minute in 1983, getting ready for the 1984 campaign, they wanted to tell America that all the seniors, your Social Security checks are getting cut by like 20% or something like that? No. So they were sufficiently motivated, because the Social Security system was close to getting insolvent, to do something about it. And they did really four things to increase revenues. They increased the payroll tax. So the 6.2 and 6.2 and 12.4 was much less. And they raised it over time to get it to where it is. It's been where it is today since 1990. But so it hasn't changed since then. But point is they increased the payroll tax. The self-employed, the question you asked earlier, before 1983, if you were self-employed, all you paid was your side of it. The employer didn't have to pay their side of it. So they created the employer match. So that was a big increase on employers. It didn't go over real well. Federal workers were brought into the system, and state and local governments were brought into the Social Security system. So they did those four things to increase revenue. And what they also did is they started taxing Social Security for people that had what they defined as a higher income. So they started paying income taxes, and then they made sure that that income tax revenue flowed back into the Social Security system. And that's where we see it in 2025. It was $58 billion of revenue for the system. And then they increased the full retirement age from 65 to 67. And by the way, the last phase into that is just happening now, is the people born in 1959 going on Social Security, their full retirement age was 66 in 10 months. And the people born in 1960, it's actually 67 is your full retirement age for Social Security. So they phased in that, but it took them 40 years of the phase in. And all of that put together set Social Security on track to where we stand in 2026. We're 8 years away from 2034 is when this thing is projected to be zero, providing we don't do anything. Am I making sense? Okay. So that's what went on in 1983. And so now we're going to move over to what are we going to propose that we do in 2026 to head off this problem in 2034. We don't need to wait till 2033 to do something about this. We don't want this thing to get to the brink like it was before. So now we need to phase into, like, how are we going to fix this? And the way we're going to fix it is we're going to do one of three things, or a combination, a little bit of all three. We're going to increase the payroll tax just like they did before. I mean, that's just pure numbers in accounting. If we took in 1.3 trillion at the current rates, and we need to take in more, we need to come up with some sort of a formula to increase the payroll tax. And I've got a little proposal here that I'm going to show everybody. The second option is to delay full retirement age from 67 to 70. Okay, is to do the same thing they did when they took it from 65 to 67. You know, we could delay the full retirement age from 67 to 70, and we would have to slowly phase that in. We can't take somebody who's 66 now and say, you got to wait till 70. Whereas we told you before, just like they did before, it'll be somebody your age, Drew, that you're going to have to wait till 70 to get your full, you'll still be able to file early, but that's an area of fix. And none of these things are popular. So this is not all about popular today. I'm just telling you as a financial person, like kind of what you need to do to balance the books. And then the third option would to do the payroll tax beyond the 184,500, which is the maximum Social Security taxable earnings, and without crediting earnings. So let me explain that a little bit. Is that so? Let's say somebody makes $100,000 a year. Well, they pay this full tax, and their employer does on all 100,000, and then their Social Security check is going to be such that they made 100,000 back in 2026. Okay, they didn't make more than that. They didn't make less than that, and that's buying them Social Security benefits in the future. If somebody made $300,000, they only paid this tax up to $184,500, and then the other $120,000 that they made above that, they didn't pay this tax, and their employer did. People say, "Oh, I didn't know that." Well, now you know it. Okay, it has a cap on it, and the reason it has a cap is because the people that earn this or more, they're going to get, you know, a $4,000 a month Social Security check when they're 67 years old, okay, or more adjusted for inflation. So every time you increase this, you increase the future Social Security checks of the people, you know, in the future. So if you made this 220,000 where you taxed it, you'd have to give those people $5,000 a month or so. So when you increase this, the maximum total earnings, you increase future Social Security checks. So this has been a real political hot potato, but what they've talked about doing is just taxing all your earnings at this rate, but only giving you credit for the Social Security check at the level of whatever the maximum increase. And, you know, I'm not sitting here saying I'm for tax increases or benefit changes or any of that kind of stuff. I'm just simply sitting here, you know, as a financial person that's analyzed the books and saying, we got to come up with more revenue, or we just do. And these are your three choices. So, Tom, I want to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think study after study after study has all shown the same thing that, and this is across political parties, it's across ages, it's across all demographics. They've all said they would rather increase revenue, increase taxes, as opposed to cutting benefits. No one is in favor of cutting your check there. And the politicians know that, right? They see those studies, they have people talking to them about this. And so the frustrating thing as a citizen of the United States here is the longer we wait to do something, the more drastic the change is going to need to be, right? If we do stuff now, the increases will not need to be as much as if we wait till like we did back in 1983, where they were months away. And I do want to pause there for a second because I hear this all the time. It's like, oh, it's going to run out. We can't fix it. Again, I just want you to really hear this. They were months away, not years away. They were months away from running out, and they fixed it then. So to think that they're not going to make a change this go round, I think is silly. Again, no one knows. I can't predict the future, but I think it is much more likely that they do fix this system, whatever that looks like. And I think it is going to be some combination of what Hans put on the board here: increasing taxes, changing full retirement age, increasing the tax limit of what your income is there. That all of those are sort of on the revenue side of benefits, and that's going to bring in more money into the system, help shore this up. Because at the end of the day, there are too many seniors that solely rely on Social Security for their income. They can't, either party politically cannot afford to let this sort of blow up, cut benefits by 20, 30%, which is what the projections are, if we don't fix this. Because if you don't fix it, the default is decreasing benefits. That's sort of in the law what happens, and no one wants that. So they're going to make some changes here, is my prediction. When that happens, who knows, right? I mean, it's going to happen probably or hopefully before the system runs out. But again, it would be better the sooner they do it, the less impact those changes are going to have on you and I or whoever's still working. Because I think that's where the changes will likely be. But we'll just have to wait and see. But at the end of the day, this system is too important for our country for them to let it fail and not stay solvent to be able to pay the benefits that they have promised up to this point. Drew, you have any thoughts on that or any more questions?
Yeah, just final thoughts here for you, Hans. So, how worried should people be when seeing these numbers? And how much would you say the current status of the Social Security Trust Fund influences our advice when we're helping our clients?
Well, we have our 7 worries, and I'm just going to tell you, worrying doesn't do any good. But how worried should people be? I have a lot of faith they're going to fix this. I mean, and some of that is influenced by you, and I'm talking to all of you watching, of you understanding the problem and the math, okay? I mean, and that's what I tried to show you today is the math. And, if you put I just showed you math and accounting. I haven't shown you actuarial science because that report that's 270 pages long gets into predicting all the birth rates and how many workers there's going to be and how long people are going to live and all of these moving parts. And what the report says, if you do nothing, 2034, we're going to run out of money. And when we run out of money, we can't take it out of general federal revenues. So their only option is going to be to cut benefits. And, so yeah, your worry there is if all of us, and I don't want to just say the government does, if we collectively don't do anything about this, because we're all in this thing together, if we don't come up with a solution, then your level of worry is just knowing that your Social Security check is going to be 20% less. For people my age, you're not going to be getting a Social Security check in 2034. I mean, you're going to be getting a Social Security check in the 2050s sometime. And if I was you, I wouldn't be that worried about it. I'd just be focused on trying to get everybody around to do something about it. And I hear a lot of complaining about this, and I hear a lot of people just throwing out simple solutions. And, I think we need to get off of some of the simple solutions, and we need to start getting collectively, we need to be supportive of forming a bipartisan commission, taking this stuff seriously, bringing the accountants in the room so you're looking at real numbers, somebody that can actually show the problem, and then looking through a list of politically unpopular solutions and coming up with something that's workable and just fixing it. I do want to add something that I skipped over is I just ran some simple numbers. I said, if we could do 2025 again, and where we took 160 billion out of the trust fund, if we could do 2025 all over, which we can't, how much would we need to increase the payroll tax to where we would have collected an extra $160 billion to, then we would have had no reduction in the trust fund. So just on a short-term basis, using only one of the solutions, how could we wash out the $160 billion? We could do it with an extra 0.6 or 0.6% increase. We could take the 6.2 to 6.8 on both sides. That would have raised $160 billion. So that's a pretty significant, it's almost a 10% increase in the payroll tax. So I don't think that's going to fly. I just wanted to show you from a numbers standpoint what would have closed the gap for 1 year that's already in history. It's pretty significant, but if we did a combination of a phased in thing over this and did the delay of the full retirement age and did some extra taxes coming in for the people beyond 184, if we put all three of those things together and then pushed it through Congress, then with a bipartisan way, we could set this program up to last so it's going to be paying you Social Security checks, Drew. Okay, so what I want to finish up with is we've talked almost all day about Social Security in terms of the 7 worries. We did talk about income, and we did talk about taxes. So we covered 3 of them. I'm Hans Scheil.
And I'm Tom Griffith.
And I'm Drew Samala.
And we thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
Thanks.